Hello, I'm Kyle Frya. I'm joined today by political science professor Brad Young. We're going to be talking about the election that is tonight. So first, let's talk about the presidential race in Utah. For a while, it looked like it would be close between McMullen, Clinton, and Trump. However, Trump started to open up a bit of a lead. What do you think will end up happening there?
I really think that Trump will win the state. Part of that is due to the fact, first of all, Clinton has many downsides in the state of Utah. When it came to primary season, Utah was neither enthused about Trump nor about Clinton. We have more Sanders and Cruz folks. With those candidates off and now just the remaining two, it was like, well, Clinton is not that impressive to the state. McMullen provided an alternative, and that was an interesting idea. He resonated. Some of his own background and ideas and policies are similar to classic Republicanism or perhaps neoconservative international relations. However, in the face of, will we end up turning our vote to Clinton? Could it be picking a candidate just for our own, I guess, for the moral sake of it, rather than for a pragmatic, who do you want to win? And I think people have just started to come home to the party to say, even if we don't like this nominee so much, we'd rather not risk having the other side win. It's become far more a vote against. And that actually bears out in polling that a lot more, a majority of Trump supporters, not a large majority, but a majority of Trump supporters tend to be anti-Hillary supporters first, and their candidate supporters second. Now, Hillary has that same problem. Majority is still voting for her across the country, but there's still a good fair 40 to 45% that are just saying, I want someone besides Trump. So that's probably what's hurt McMullen. Clinton really never had much of a chance in the state of Utah, just because people, I think, would not want to vote for a Democrat, for the National Democratic Party, regardless of whether it was Hillary or anyone else.
So obviously, Bill Clinton famously finished third in Utah in 1992. Do you think she'll finish third in Utah, or do you think she'll beat McMullen for second?
I actually think she will finish third. I don't have the greatest of credentials in American government. My graduate work wasn't in that area, but from everything I've seen, Trump has a good 10-point lead on McMullen, but closer to a 12-point lead on Clinton in one of the latest polls. Earlier, that was flipped, where McMullen was coming in third, but I think some people are saying, well, it looks as though Utah is safely in this hand. Let me pull away from Clinton and vote for McMullen because I would like him. Or some of the Democrats may just be staying home or not voting on the top line and voting, well, they vote down ticket and there aren't as many competitive races. So I think, just my own gut, yeah, she's going to come in third, but I wouldn't put any money on it.
So you talked about the down ballot races in Utah. Obviously, they're pretty all solidly Republican. There's only one really race that people are kind of looking at, and that's the Mia Love race, obviously against Doug Owens, a rematch from 2014. The latest poll showed she was up by 12. The Owens campaign says they're narrowing the gap. What do you think that final margin will be, and do you think Love will pull it off?
Given the fact that there's, excuse me, a lack of enthusiasm for the national, sorry, it's allergy season for me. There's a lack of enthusiasm for the top of the ticket for the Democratic Party in Utah. It does not bode as well down ticket. Owens could have been helped by kind of the anti-Republican animosity to say this is the obstruction party, because in 2014 that was more the narrative that the Democratic Party was able to construct. President Obama's trying to do things, the Republicans in Congress are obstructing him. I am Wayne Owens, and not Wayne Owens, Doug Owens. See, I'm old enough to remember Wayne. I'm Owens, and I could be part of that non-obstruction. I won't be the obstructionist that Love and the other Republicans have been. That narrative has been lost in the personalities and the allegations across the Clinton-Trump campaigns. And so that hasn't taken traction. I don't think as many Utah Democrats are going to turn out, and I think those who are kind of middle of the road will say, well, Mia Love, Republican label. You also get a greater turnout in the presidential elections, so more people who would have stayed home in the midterms will come out now, and I think you'll see a stronger showing for Mia Love because of the Republican label. People who say, yeah, it's presidential year, we go out, we're Utahns, we vote Republican. That tends to correlate.
So moving on from just Mia Love and the Utah race, let's talk about political philosophy as a whole, and that is Mia Love and Mike Lee have both refused to endorse Trump within Utah. the Utah philosophy is a little different than the rest of the country due to the religious elements and other things like that. Do you think that Utah Republicanism has been changed at all by Trump, or do you think the major kind of openness to immigration, refugees, that kind of more compassionate sentiment will continue in Utah politics going into the future?
I think Utah will hold out their version of republicanism. I do think that partisan politics are not as solid as religious identity, though they often have correlated well. One of my professors that you famously said, you tell me either your religion or your partisan identification in Utah, and I can predict your vote. Both of those correlate strongly. There may be a little bit of division now if the National Republican Party goes more with Trump populism. There's some distinctions there that are not classic republicanism or kind of mainstream republicanism recently. Utah will be a holdout. We've always been a little bit of a holdout. We may not trust big national government, but when it comes to government in general, we're pretty good about it. We like our state government. We like our local government. We're okay with that idea, so that stronger libertarian, anti-government streak that might be more in the national party, you don't always see it as much in Utah. And I think that we will continue to be a bit of the holdout, so that if Trump does win the presidency, the Utah delegation is not going to be one that just says, oh, well, that's now our party leader. We're going to go with whatever he says and look for his initiative. They'll kind of hold fast on some of the things that they've traditionally held on to. And you're not going to change the minds of Utahns as far as the immigration issue. Yeah, we like having law and order. We like to have proper policies in place, but the compassion for refugees, the compassion for those who are fleeing poor economic or other situations, it's not going to resonate. Certainly with the Latter-day Saint population, but Utahns in general, even if you're not LDS, you've kind of grown up around that culture in Utah. And it's not uniquely LDS, but it's strongly influenced by it. So I don't think the Utah party is going to be able to go in with a new brand of republicanism, and I actually don't think the Republican Party is going to move too much closer to the Trump version of it. He's more personality a candidate. If he loses, the Republicans are going to say, we're never going to let that happen. In 2020, we're going to put all sorts of constraints, restrictions. We will make sure that we get normal candidates. And I mean, it may sound offensive that way, but yeah, they don't want another Trump. It was a bad thing for the Republican Party. They'll probably say, no, we don't want that.
So looking now to this election, one thing that a lot of people talk about is control of the U.S. Senate, because a lot of people say Trump will lose and Republicans can still hold the Senate. Out of all the Senate seats that you've seen, which do you think is most likely to determine control for the U.S. Senate, and ultimately, who do you think will come out on top in the Senate?
And I'm going to forget their name. Harry Reid's vacating seat in Nevada is an interesting one. Being familiar, I lived in New Jersey for 7 years, so I know the power of local machine politics. And it's not the old corrupt machine politics, but that influence that party leaders can have, the party machine can have, especially in Nevada, where the population is so centered in just a few small areas, down in Clark County and a little bit up in Reno. But for the most part, they're all right there. I think that one they'll pull off for the Democrat holding on there for Harry Reid's seat. So that one won't flip, I don't think, unless there's demographic change. Plus, the Trump factor, if you get enough of an Hispanic or Latino turnout that is wary of a Trump presidency, they might help a lot more down ticket. New Hampshire, and I never remember how to say her name, but the sitting senator there, I think she might hold. If she can hold that seat, you're probably going to get a 51-49 Republican. But those are the two you'd watch. Right now, it's looking much better for a 50-50 split, and then Vice President Kaine being the deciding vote on any tied vote in the Senate. That being said, even in the Senate, you have to have 60 senators to really get too much done, unless they change their own rules. So not a lot will be done, but this one, I would say, watch those two, the Nevada and the New Hampshire Senate races. Those are the ones, if they both go Republican, then they've solidly kept the Senate. If New Hampshire flips, it's probably going to be a Democratic Senate.
So looking now to the presidential race as a whole, where would you gauge Trump's chances as right now? Would you say he's really unlikely, or do you think he has a path to victory?
There is a path to victory. Part of it is, and Nate Silver over at 538 has discussed this a little bit. But you never know if there's going to be a Turner effect until you actually see the results and then can compare that with polling data ahead of time. And the Turner effect came from an African-American candidate in California that was polling very well in the early 80s in an election and then did very poorly in the election itself. And they said, oh, it seems as though people were answering, yes, I'll vote for this gentleman, because they did not want to appear to the caller as racist, as saying, I won't vote for this guy because he's African-American. Some have posited that there is a Turner effect, only it's a Trump effect, where people are not willing to say they are voting for Trump because they don't want to be viewed with some of the social and critical baggage that he's been burdened with. So they'll say, I'm either undecided, or they say they're not voting. They'll do something to disqualify them from the poll in some way or put them in a different category. If they all come out, if there's a group of hidden Trump voters that have not been showing up in the polls, he has a shot. Structurally, he has to hold Florida, he has to hold North Carolina, he has to hold Ohio, and he probably has, if he can flip New Hampshire, which right now is leaning a lot stronger towards Clinton, if he can hold those, we'll have to wait perhaps to Nevada to see. If he can flip Pennsylvania or Virginia, which I don't think are very likely, Virginia used to be solid Republican, but it's been Obama Democrat since, and with the growing demographics there, I would say he has a path. But if you watch those 5 states, and if you see 3 of them going for Clinton, it's over. She's got the map. If Trump can hold Florida, North Carolina, Ohio, then you watch Nevada. If he's got New Hampshire, even better chance. There is a path, but with so many undecideds, that's the other problem. The polling is probably not a good predictor, and the mood of the country, what are people thinking? If there is, as Michael Moore, sadly I'm quoting Michael Moore amazingly, if he's right that there is an anti-establishment push in the country, that may find itself voting for Trump because he is as much an outsider or more an outsider than Clinton. Clinton is establishment all the way through. Trump might be that protest vote against Washington in general. Throw the bums out, drain the swamp, all those statements about let's clean out Washington of incumbents. Hillary Clinton represents that. Trump represents an outside.
So looking after this election, you talked about the Republican Party and Trump Republicanism and conservatism for a second. Is there any of that that's going to be able to stay the populist anti-trade wave? Republicans used to be the free traders. Now there was a poll that showed 87% of Republicans thought that trade led to a loss in jobs. So do you think that any of Trumpism in the Republican Party is going to be able to hang around, and do you think that Republicans will be able to wipe that out by 2020?
I would think they'd be able to. Now, granted, within my own personal ideology is that free trade is a good thing overall. At the smaller level, at the more local level, it's hard to say that to someone whose factory where they've worked for 20 years has just been shut down, to say, this is better for you because you will be able to get cheaper goods somewhere. No, I've just lost my job. I've lost my benefits. I have no pension. That can resonate, and that's part of the pains of globalization. Keeping it within the Republican Party, I don't see the Democrats having an answer for that, despite the fact that there is more of a free trade, perhaps internationalist flavor in the Clinton campaign versus the Trump campaign. There is still a very strong streak within the Democratic Party for economic equality and justice. The idea that economics, the market, is to be regulated in order to maintain fairness or justice in some way. So I don't think they'll have a home there. I think it will come back to the Republican Party because most of the candidates down ticket, most of the leadership really is this way. And they'll probably be able to bring those who were in favor of Trump back in. It will be a bit of a struggle. It'll take some kind of quality and crafty leadership to say, how are we going to do this? Because the strong resentment for what globalization has done. Because as you said, I see my job loss, I see my house devalued, I see others taking a job that I used to be able to have. That's going to be hard to overcome, but I don't see that there's an alternative unless you get a stronger division that fractures both parties, where you have the internationalists, the global economists, those who say it's a good thing to have more open access to markets as one force, and that American power and American interaction is a good thing abroad, versus those that say, well, we should not be so engaged in the world, and in fact the world can be dangerous to us, we need to put some economic barriers up. I also don't think history bodes well for that one, because that takes us back to policies closer to the 30s and in the Great Depression, the worldwide depression. But that being said, it may still resonate, but I don't know where those people would find a home, because there's not really a candidate out there. Because if you say, well, I'll go to the libertarians. No, libertarians want open borders. They're in a government-less group. So they won't really have a home that would say, where can I go to find protectionism? I have to turn to being a Democrat. Republicans won't do that.
So if you look at it, Trump has brought in a lot of people who are don't like the globalization thing, older, whiter voters who are working class voters. But on the other hand, it also has turned off a lot of Hispanics and minorities, and Republicans in 2013 did an autopsy report saying, you know, we need more Latinos, we need more African Americans within the Republican Party. So how do you find that balance? Because like you were talking about, a lot of those people could leave the Republican Party if they do a full purge of Trump, you know. Yeah. But so how do you strike that balance of trying to get more minorities participating while also trying to keep those people that Trump's brought into the process?
The way you do that, in discussing who supports Trump and who is bringing in those ideas and supporting the ideas of Trump, one bit of research has shown that though the idea is that it's costing American jobs, or we are being inundated with illegals. Those ideas are there, and that's what resonates with the Trump campaign. The people who support Trump are actually ones that are further removed from that effect. They tend to be wealthier. They tend to be more insulated from the global economy. They tend to be more insulated from diversity. They are in more homogeneous areas. So if you want to bring in that diversity, you have that group. The only thing you'd be losing if you went a little more diverse, a little more welcoming, change the tone to be more inclusive, you'd lose people that wouldn't have anywhere else to go, because they are already the solid, classic Republican core. So I don't think there's much risk. You might turn them off and they might stay home. But to be blunt, they're getting older, and which means they're going to vote more often, more frequently. But they're also going to die out. It may be that you look at the demographics and just say, we need to make sure we're addressing these issues. The other thing is, it doesn't have to be a really cut and dry thing. Immigration isn't a cut and dry issue, because amongst Hispanics and Latinos, those who are, as they poll say, there's a need for proper role of law and order in all of this. It's not that we want to leave everybody out, but if you are someone who struggled to get here, get the green card, naturalize, and do the whole process, it's an expensive and a lengthy process, and then you see people just hopping in and getting amnesty, there's a bit of, that's not fair, because I worked so hard for this, they didn't. So it's not as cut and dry there. On African American and racial issues, that one's a harder one, because it's become almost just a knee-jerk identity for both parties. They say, well, this is, we're Democrats, we're black, we vote Democratic. That's going to be a harder one to overcome, and the Obama presidency has exacerbated that, because opposition to the partisan efforts of President Obama have come off as opposition to, well, he's a black man, and therefore we don't want the black issue there. That's going to be harder for any lead in the Republican Party to overcome. So it can be done. The demographics, I think, are there, but it's going to take a great deal of outreach, recognition of cross-cutting policy issues that are not race-based or not identity-based, that affect a variety of people, to say, this is how it can be better for everybody, and we have alternatives that are good for everybody, not just it's a black or white issue, or it's a Mexican and American issue.
So finally, what is your final prediction for tonight? Do you think Hillary Clinton's going to be able to pull it out, or do you think Trump will pull off the surprise?
If I were to be pinned down on it, I would say Clinton gets a modest electoral college victory. She will break into the 300s, most likely. Not too much further than that in terms of how big that is. It's going to be small. She will not get the majority of the popular vote, so she'll be a minority president, just like her husband was, just like George Herbert Walker Bush. Others have been, get that with a third party in play. She will win the presidency. There will be difficulty for her governing, just because less than half the voters voted, and 45% of her own voters were voting against Trump. But I think in the end, we'll be looking at President Clinton probably about the time Florida gets called. And that one, I lived through the 2000 election. It was heart-wrenching, it was hard, it was difficult to watch and hang on for a month and a week. But I would hope for at least a week of action before we decided. But if they can get that called, Florida's my key state. I think we'll have President Clinton for the 3rd time in the Republic.
Okay, well, that is it. I appreciate Professor Brad Young being here today, and we may end up being proven completely wrong. There may be a landslide either way. But this really is an important philosophical discussion as we continue to go into the future, both in Utah and the nation. So thank you for watching.